here's one. Happened to have a interesting response to this, and I understand somebody said don't take them in terms of upticks. Think about them in terms of time. I'll try to get to a couple more anyway, and we'll certainly be doing these for them from the member section. So Friday writes. Bill Dr. Karen Siegman, president of the American Freedom Alliance, was fired by the private school where she taught. Her crime was espousing the advantage of Western civilization outside the purview of her place of employment. She never brought her views into her classes. She taught math. Meanwhile, there are classes being taught in my high school promoting the ideas of white privilege and Black Lives Matter, where the philosophies of W.E.B. Du Bois are applauded. Booker T. Washington is painted as a submersive schmuck. I know you've given speeches for the AFA. My question to you is this: is it worth it for educators like Dr. Siegman to push back? I do in little ways, but never enough to make a dent. How hard should conservative teachers buck the system in the hope for a change? By the way, they finally broke me. This will be my last year in public education. I've experienced the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back, and I'm getting out. Well, you'll be surprised to know, or maybe not, that I had a chance to discuss Dr. Siegman's case with Dr. Siegman, who we generally, Natasha and I, see at least a couple times a month socially. We've been friends since the first AFA event I did for them, and we see each other socially quite a lot. We're very good friends. And we were sitting at Paradise Cove in Malibu. I was drinking one of their rum punch smoothies, pineapple smoothie with rum in it. I know it sounds fruity. I don't care. It's the most delicious thing that God has ever created on this earth. And we were talking about the whole thing with her. And needless to say, it broke her heart. But I think there are two things that will give her some consolation. First of them is that the classes just graduated just a couple days ago. Her class finally graduated. And now that the classes were over and she wasn't teaching anymore, that released a certain amount of constraint and pressure. And Karen received so many letters from her students. The students took her out to dinner, or it was a lunch, I don't remember. But her students took her out, bought her a $60 dinner because they were so outraged by what happened here. Somebody wrote in and said, this is an injustice. You should be ashamed of yourself. And then the principal wrote an email to Karen, including this, saying, see, this is why you can't work here. You generate this kind of hate for the school. So Karen has a couple of, what's the word I'm looking for? I just hate it when I blank out like this. It happens more and more often. Consolations. One of them is that all of her students adore her, wrote letters severely critical of what they're doing, basically said that after the election of Trump in 2016, a number of her students went up and offered their condolences because they were sure that she would have voted for Hillary Clinton because she's a teacher. That's how much she brought her politics into the thing. She spent an entire 2 days with a Muslim student. I forget exactly. I think something happened where the student wasn't able to go someplace or whatever, and he and Dr. Siegman spent 2 days together working on math and stuff. This is way after the so-called hateful Islamophobic remarks about how the West is amazing and all the rest. So one of her consolations is knowing that the kids that she actually taught not only don't buy it, but they're outraged by it, and that outrage will never leave them. That will make them conservatives for the rest of their lives. The other consolation I think she has is that I think she has a superb legal case. I mean, a superb, absolutely top-notch legal case. And it is my hope, and to the degree that I speculate on these things, it's my hope and my expectation that she's going to walk away with a significant sum of money from this. And I hope it's enough money to get that principal fired, because it sounds like what happened was one teacher, one of these communist teachers, saw the event that she did that was not on school campus, had nothing to do with anything, where she uttered the absolutely intolerable provocation of saying that Western civilization was the most amazing civilization in the world, not only because of all the science and culture and everything, but also because it belonged to everybody, that anybody could just buy in. You want to be an American? Come here legally, raise your right hand. Congratulations, welcome to Western civilization. And so one left winger, a teacher, none of the students, a teacher, brought that to the attention of the principal, and the principal, also being a giant left wing hypocrite, murder apologist, decided to fire her, or technically speaking, not renew her contract. I don't know anything about the details of the case. I'm not speculating on the case. I don't have any inside information on the case, nothing like that. But it is my fond hope, is that she sues them till their ears bleed. I want her to get every single dime out of that school. And Dave Big Booty points out, or Big Booty points out, that Oberlin had been slapped with a major judgment. More lawyers will be willing to take on lefty colleges. This is something that should have happened a long time ago, and I don't believe in lawfare as something that civilized people do to each other, but we're not dealing with civilized people. Oberlin did this kind of anti-conservative discrimination, won the aggrieved parties won against Oberlin, and it was a big award. I want to say it's $30 million or something like that. Okay, now if Karen's case also goes and wins, what is going to happen is this: if these lawsuits continue to be successful, this is going to slow down, if not stop. It's going to have a serious effect on it, because while all of them will still have their hateful opinions, and the idea that they shouldn't be giving biology students political indoctrination never even enters their head, nevertheless, if it's costing the school $30 million every time this kind of discrimination happens, then the teachers will stop. They'll be told to stop. Bo Monday says that there are rich conservative organizations funding these lawsuits. I hope that's true, because if not, if anybody asked me what I could do with my dollar for the conservative cause out there, I wouldn't even say Bill Whittle membership. I would say if there was a legal fund for this, I would do it. And I would have every conservative student in America with their cell phones on, pointed at the sky just to get the audio. And I'd like to capture everything these people say. And then I'd file like the world's biggest class action lawsuit. And I would say, I would file it as fraud. I'm paying you money so that my kid can spend 50 minutes a day in your class learning biology, and they're not learning biology because they're learning about this person's political views. Plus the lawyers were awarded. Good. Sometimes the good guys win. We're going to see the good guys winning more and more. We are past this progressivism is on its way out. It has reached the point because it has to constantly top itself. It's all about victimhood and finding injustice. And this thing has now gotten so far out into outer space that reality is banging a sledgehammer against the face of progressivism every single day. This is just a great example. That guy who said he identified as a woman, and therefore he won. Identified as a woman, felt like a woman, wasn't undergoing any sex change operations or anything. Even if they were taking hormone therapy, they still got a male pelvis. So anyway, the point is, progressives say that we should that the girls should be empowered, and the girls should be that women's sports should not be any differently funded than men. Okay, I think Title IX is a catastrophe, but the idea behind it is a good idea. So you spend 20 years, 30 years talking about how girls and women's athletics are important, and then some guy comes along who says he feels like a woman And so because he feels like a woman, he's allowed to run in the women's category, and then he beats the biological women by something like 2 seconds in the 400 meter, which is usually won by a tenth of a second or something. Um, and and now what happens? They can't they 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 can't they can't do the rational, logical thing. Not only because they're incapable of it, but because in this case it violates everything they believe in. The rational thing would be to say, well, look, while we completely support your ability to go through a free society and identify yourself any way you want to, the fact of the matter is you were born with a Y chromosome, and if you want to believe you're a woman and be treated as a woman, I'm fine with that. But you have not only do you have Y chromosome and male muscle mass, most importantly, you have a male pelvis, which can be determined by X-rays by anybody in the entire world who's a medical doctor. I can tell you that man or a woman, and that mechanical advantage of the build of that pelvis allows you to win these races. And it doesn't matter how much hormones you're taking or any of the rest of that nonsense. So this is where they are now. And the beautiful thing about it is they can't go backwards. And so here's what's happening. Cheryl just pointed out that female track athletes are starting to sue. Good. I'll tell you what the most disgusting thing I've seen in terms of just cruelty and intimidation and brainwashing. The cruelest thing I've seen, and I've seen it several times now, is not watching these guys talking about how they feel good about being able to run, the way they feel. The cruelest thing by far is not even watching female athletes crying. That alone is hard to watch, and that's very sad and very tragic, and my heart goes out to them. But that's not the cruel thing. The cruel thing is watching these young women force themselves to say, oh no, I'm just very happy for her. What she's doing is very, very brave. Forcing themselves to say that. And you can see it on their faces. And you can tell what they're really thinking. You can tell what their parents are really thinking too. But everybody, well, not everybody, but certainly the societal pressure is for them to say, no, it's just a wonderful thing. I'm so happy I could live in a world where a woman who happened to be born a man gets to compete in the gender that they believe themselves to be. So where is this going to go? Well, this is why I think they're finished. I really do. I think this is endgame progressivism. Where do you go on this one issue? It can only go two ways, and neither of them are feasible for the left. The sane way would be to say, okay, look, we haven't thought this thing through. I'm sorry if you identify as a woman, but it's just too much of an advantage, and if it hurts your feelings, we're terribly sorry. Because progressivism is all about whoever has the most hurt feelings wins. This guy is a transsexual. That gives him an enormous advantage. Plus, he's black, which gives him an unbeatable advantage. A young black man trying to be a woman, that pretty much is the sweepstakes. And so the feelings of one person with a high victimhood coefficient, I like that term actually. I'm going to have to remember that. Trumps, if you'll pardon the expression, the feelings of 30 million women athletes. So, where does this go? What is the left going to do? Because this is going to continue to happen. Either they reverse themselves and tell these guys, you know what, we got this one wrong. It's not fair to the girls. It's either going to be that, and it's not going to be that, or they're going to continue to support this idea of biological men who either are in transition surgery or have had the surgery or they're in hormone replacement, or in the case of this one guy in high school, just feel like a woman today. And since that is where they're going to end up, then women's athletics is finished. There will not be any women in the Olympics. Not in any. There may be women in the Olympics in areas like shooting, maybe competitive shooting, but anything that requires physical power and speed, there will not be any women in the Olympics. If they decide to keep the women's category will be filled with transgender men. Every one of them. The fastest woman ever, Flojo, I want to say it was 84 Olympics. It might have been a little later, but it was a while ago. Her best time, the fastest that a woman has ever run the 100-meter dash, ever, is routinely beaten by boys in high school and beaten every day by men in college, young men in college, track teams. So this is one of many things that they simply can't avoid. Los Angeles now, as I record this, over the hill, downtown LA, they've documented at least 3 cases of bubonic plague. The Black Death is in downtown Los Angeles because the garbage there has been allowed to accumulate, and because the progressive attitude towards homeless people demands that we accept the fact that this is not their fault, that it's a housing problem, when it's not a housing problem, it's a mental health problem. But they won't admit that, and so these homeless villages, cities. I saw something in Salinas. That's where you're from, isn't it, Lisa, or near there? As we were taking the train out of Salinas, we right up against the train tracks. It wasn't like 10 tents or 20 tents. It was 5 or 6 minutes of tents. It was a homeless city out there in Salinas, and now we have bubonic plague in downtown Los Angeles, second largest city in America, glamour capital of the world. We have bubonic plague in downtown Los Angeles. And we have people who need iPhone apps to avoid stepping in human feces in San Francisco. If you think that this can go on forever, you're wrong. People will continue to leave California, and they'll continue to move to Texas. And they will do that because they're smart, and because they're not so smart, they'll bring California politics with them, but that's another story. But if you think that this can continue, it won't. It won't. San Francisco's, ooh, San Fran feces, very good. Of course, typhus and all the rest of that stuff, needless to say, that's there too. So it can't continue, but it has to continue, which is why I have gone from a state of really profound pessimism, no matter how much I try to keep my chin up. It was really kind of like, man, we just got to roll this boulder up the hill one more day, just do it one more day, to really, even the last year or so, even more feeling like that this progressive meltdown is in progress, and we're going to have to pass the socialism so that we can find out what's in it. That's what's going to happen to America. I really believe it. We're going to have to endure progressivism long enough for us to find out what's in it, and then people will see what it's all about, and then they won't put up with it anymore. And meanwhile, deep inside one of the Rocky Mountains at an undisclosed location, this space age spirit of what motivated individuals can do on their own when they decide to get together as free individuals, that evidence is not just a story, it's evidence. And I think it's about time that somebody just got up and started blowing that silver trumpet again, that this wasn't just a different time, it was a better time. It was a better time in every way. Oh, there were 60s, in the 60s there was racism. Absolutely right, there was, yes, no question. There's more racism than there is today. Absolutely right. But I never met an engineer or a test pilot or anyone with the intelligence to be working on a space program who ever expressed the slightest whiff of racism. The thing that the progressives don't understand about this space age attitude is they look at NASA and they see that everybody in mission control is white and male. And what they think is that they're only hiring white males, when the truth is they're hiring the best people in the world. And this is certainly the case today, when there are black engineers, women engineers who are at that level, then they will be welcomed into mission control, because mission control and the space age needs the best people we can find. And once again, you're kind of in a spot here if you're a progressive. I know they want to enforce this, and I know that it is possible to pass a law that says that 50% of the engineers at this engineering company must be female. It is possible to pass a law like that, but you can't pass the biology of it. If you have 50% female engineers, you will be forced to take second raters in order to make that quota. Will that change? I don't know. I would like it to be 50%. I honestly would. I want, and needless to say, I think anybody who should have a right to do pretty much anything they want to, as long as they don't hurt anybody else. This idea that we're keeping women out of engineering is kind of nuts. What you hear when people talk about, when you hear women, progressives talking about this, there's not enough women in STEM. Well, why do you think that is? Well, because it's male dominated. But how does that affect things? Well, everybody's just cold and insensitive, and it's all about logic and reason and all of these other things. And they want that legislated away. Somebody said something to me, what was it, yesterday? Where was I? Hang on, I got to think about this. Where was I? We were talking about, I was talking to somebody about just these biological differences between men and women, and they said that they were in a classroom, and a young female student raised her hand and said, "No, I'm sorry, Miss Whatever, you're wrong about that. Differences, the biological differences between men and women were outlawed in 1973. That's what she said. And they believe it. Where I remember was at a speaking event. We were talking about this. It came up in one of the questions. Like I say, conservative women understand this, and it doesn't threaten them. This modern feminist thing is not a question of equality. They want to, legal equality. They will make movies with women leading men into combat, and they can believe that this is going to provide an example so that other women will grow up to lead men into combat. But that's not going to happen. And it hasn't happened, and it won't happen, because biology is biology. I am not saying that there aren't some good female soldiers, but I am saying there's very, very, very few of them, and it's a lie, and they're trying to force this lie down people's throats. And this is where it comes into contact with reality, and reality wins. So we were talking about this, and I said the real danger is that these young women now, as evidenced by this what this millennial girl said, young women do not believe that there's any biological difference between men and women. I've seen more and more and more of these young SJWs getting in the faces of guys and starting to punch them. And they start punching them because they know that they're even not aware of it. They just know it. On some level, they've grown up in a society where men striking women is abomination, and rightfully so. So you see these little nasty, mean-spirited SJWs, start punching guys in the face. And And as long as this continues, more and more young girls and women are going to think that it really is a question of, okay, well, I guess we'll get into a fight. And I don't know how that ends. I can't count the number of times I've seen men get just whacked in the face by these women and just keep walking away, keep backing up. And that just simply tells this particular kind of women, gives them more reinforcement, makes them think that the guy's scared of them. When I was talking about this at the event the other day, I said, you don't have to like it, or you don't have to hate it either. The fact of the matter is this. A woman can hit me as hard as she can, and it would be annoying. If I hit a woman as hard as I can, I might kill her. And that's just the way it is. We're bred for combat. We're speaking myself only, of course, we're just nothing but solid sheet muscle. We're bred for combat. We're good at fighting, and we're good at task problem solving and so on. And you can't do anything about that. So there will be people who will continue to say, we need to legislate more women engineers. And then the response to that should be, well, at what point will you begin your engineering training? Well, I'm not saying I want to be an engineer. I'm just saying I'm here to raise awareness of it. And that's when you say, well, it turns out that when it comes to raising awareness of things, women are doing just fine. In fact, I would say they have the market pretty much cornered. I think we need to legislate a law that says there should be 50% of all the men that get into awareness raising ought to be male. It's so one-sided. Yeah, thank you, Lisa. I came up with this. I've never heard anyone else talk about it before. But I think really what you get down to is, when you really get down to it, these feminists, when you ask them why, what's going on, you realize that they don't want to be engineers. They want to major in engineering studies. That's what it is. They're not engineers, but they're engineering studies majors, which means they're people that talk about engineers and make social comments about engineers. They can't build a damn thing, but they're determined to tell you that they could if they wanted to. I'm going to do one more from the comments, and then I'll be happy to. I'll do more of these next time. I had a lot to talk about. I want to make sure I'm going to go back and get there. And my God, it's in chronological order. You can actually make sense out of this. Nope, it isn't. It's jumping back and forth.